Aislinn Clancy was elected in a by-election to be the MPP for Kitchener Centre. She is a member of the Green Party of Ontario and now the Queen's Park Caucus. Aislinn is one of two members and is the Deputy Party Leader. Aislinn joins us today to tell us what the Green Party of Ontario is all about, or as much as she can in 20 minutes or so. My name is Steve Ray. This is Exit 425. It's where we live. Today's guest at Exit 425.
In the main corridor of Exit 425.
Local politicians to connect with families.
What are some unique challenges?
Thanks very much, Steve, for having me.
Exit 425. It's where we live. Aislinn, welcome, and thank you for meeting me here at Exit 425.
Thanks, Steve, for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Today, the mission is to find out what the Green Party of Ontario is all about and how the Green Party looks at a variety of issues. Is the Green Party a single issue party, like all in on the environment and only in on the environment?
Not at all. We really pride ourselves in being leaders and offering reasonable solutions to the issues that are facing Ontario. Of course, climate is a very important issue that we're going to face more and more every year, and we need to be prepared for that. And it intersects with all kinds of other issues that we face. But, you know, we've last election, Mike Moffat, one of our leading housing critics in Ontario, rated the Green Party housing platform as the best. And so we really focused a lot on the affordability issues, the big bills, the foundations that we rely on, like healthcare, education, and childcare. But those big bill issues and the way our economy favors and has led to extreme unaffordability in the province are big priorities for us.
So how does the Green Party typically distinguish themselves on things like, and I'll try to avoid the federal issues, but you have the list in front of you as well. So, but the economy is something that transcends federal and provincial. And so where's the Green Party on that?
So we know that the way our economy functions right now favors a lot of that 1%. You know, the big corporations, we see grocery store prices, you know, less competition and big profits with those big grocers. Same with energy. We see a lot of government subsidies going to the oil and gas sector, but extreme profits from the oil and gas sector as well. And there isn't really those guardrails in place in our economy to ensure that there isn't that gouging. I say stop the gouging. I think folks are noticing that gouging in housing. They notice that gouging in their energy and transportation and food. And I think folks are, we know that Canadians, 50% of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. And we see more and more of those folks finding themselves unsheltered, moving down the prosperity chain, young people who can't afford to get a home or can't save when they're renting. So we want to create a better balance. But we also know that the green economy is growing when it comes to the amount we save by being ready for climate disasters, but also the renewable energy sector. You know, renewables are the cheapest form of energy, and our provincial government has made that almost impossible in the province. So that doesn't make sense. And that means that as customers who pay energy bills, we end up paying more. So we should be looking at a fair market economy, but we should also be looking at injustices that exist in the economy that disproportionately land on our bills and that disproportionately impact that low middle income group that need to pay for food, need to pay for housing.
Taxes?
You know, taxes are an important part. Like that, I think everybody, I don't know if I'm just speaking to you, but our taxes should be used responsibly. You know, we see cuts in government revenues and we see an increasing deficit. So with those $200 checks, that cost us $3 billion. Meanwhile, our local small businesses are really grappling with the impact of homelessness on our downtown that's not being addressed by the government. So I think there's a misspend in dollars, you know, $100 million by the government to say everything's great. Meanwhile, we have the highest unemployment in the country. We see a lot of red tape when it comes to building that missing middle. We see more and more that municipalities are being downloaded upon, and then folks are seeing their property taxes increase, which is a terrible way to generate money. All the municipalities agree that, you know, a senior on Ontario, on old age security, their income doesn't change, but their property tax might. So income taxes is an important way that our provincial government has enough to pay the bills, but they aren't paying the bills. right? They're privatizing healthcare, which is paying more and getting less. We see underfunded classrooms and dealing with those homelessness crisis, etc. Those things land on our emergency rooms, they land on our police services, and then those costs go up. So we see, Ontario is one of the unique places where municipalities pay for public health. They'll get operating dollars for transit. We see an increasing demand on policing because we haven't addressed the housing issues, social issues that we need to be paying for. So I see that the province likes to pride themselves on not raising taxes, but they've made cuts and misspends that have cost us instead of spending money in the right place. And they've downloaded an immense amount of work onto municipalities, landing on people's property tax, and people are getting frustrated.
And yet they're spending more money. And as Kathy Abraham, a long-term trustee in the Kawartha District School Board, she acknowledged that they're spending more money on education, but they're still not paying the bills. And it sounds like you're saying the same thing. They're collecting a lot of money, but they're just not paying the bills in the right areas. They're spending it in the wrong places. Would that be
100%.
fair?
So if we, 100%, I could give you a laundry list of needless spending that they've done. I think we all know that the checks are a political gimmick. The Highway 413, is beside an empty highway that we sold for the last $200 check. That was a bad business deal by a PC government. We have this tunnel idea that's going to cost us lakefront property for 100 years for $1. So we're not making money when we could. $230 to put alcohol in convenience stores. Meanwhile, we haven't even kept up with inflation. So they will always tell you they're spending more money than they ever have before. But, $1,500 less per student if we account for inflation in education. We're the lowest per person funding in healthcare, and that's not efficiency because we see the privatization costing us more, agency nurses costing us more. And we're the lowest by a country mile for colleges and universities. And we think of the HR problems we're having in a lot of sectors. Underfunding colleges and universities right now doesn't make sense. So we're saving money in the wrong places and not using it wisely, and spending it in the wrong places on stuff that people just aren't asking for. And it's not making life better.
You've touched on healthcare, and one of the key planks earlier in an earlier election was no more hallway healthcare. Healthcare is a provincial issue mostly, and so what is the Green Party approach to healthcare?
Last week, I talked to the students who are studying family medicine at the McMaster Satellite Campus in my riding. 50% of them are not going into family medicine. So I'm grateful that the government has expanded the number of seats in medical school. But if we're not addressing the root cause of why those students are not going into family medicine, we have not addressed the issue in a holistic way. So I'm always urging the government to be good listeners to the real partners in this, so that they're addressing the root causes of the gap. They complained that there is a massive administrative burden, and we have seen some nickel and diming from the government saying no to stick notes and using AI, but it's beyond that. There's so many hours of paperwork that family doctors do, and it's exhausting, and it leads to burnout and a desire not to be in that, even though that's where their heart might lie. They expressed to me that they get charged every time somebody goes to a walk-in clinic. All those things that reduce the amount of money that they can spend on the primary care that they want, the time they spend with their patients, really does a disservice. I do like the movement towards family health teams, but I think we really need to be listening well to those students and encouraging not only for family doctors to stay in the profession by addressing these burnout issues and cost issues, but fixing it so that more and more people that we've trained for family medicine actually go into family medicine. There's massive inequities across the doctor spectrum. Geriatrics, for example, is underfunded, so we have unmet seats. Meanwhile, we have a silver tsunami. So long as we're not listening to those folks in that profession, we are not going to be ahead of the curve, and we're not going to be actually moving forward. We're going to continue to hemorrhage family doctors, and that's not okay. We see that going through our healthcare. I also believe in housing. The way we've addressed the homelessness crisis is get a job. That quote, get off your and get a job is what our premier said. I don't think he spent 2 seconds actually sitting down with folks who are finding themselves without shelter. 85% of those folks, it's because they just couldn't pay for rent. That's because of escalating rent and the lack of growth in the shelter allowances. So we find 30% of, I think it's 25 to 30% increase in use of emergency rooms for people who need to stay warm. That's bananas.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a hospital in Toronto that's building housing as a way to alleviate some of the pressure. They said they had 50 patients that accounted for 2,000 visits to their emergency room. And so they built supportive housing because it is a better way to spend money and it alleviates the pressure on the emergency room for people who need it for those reasons, not for mental health addictions and housing.
Wow. And you've given me the name of a new podcast, the Silver Tsunami, of which I'm clearly a part of. So that's awesome. But excellent points and things that have dogged us for a long time. Just to extend that a little bit, your thoughts about the idea of allowing, like, not hospitals. I'm cautious about using the word privatizing, but allowing separate surgical units that could charge OHIP, ideally not be charging patients with their credit card, but still be servicing the healthcare and giving us more access to healthcare, or some creative way to shorten the lines for things like elective surgeries.
Yeah, so I was debating the healthcare budget and I brought this up and they said, well, those new clinics, we need to pay more for that cataract surgery because they just invested in new machinery and new operating rooms. We have underutilized operating rooms across the province. If we could have a real conversation with our hospitals about how we could optimize the operating rooms that exist already, that taxpayers have already paid for. We could pay less for that cataract surgery. It was an alarming amount. It was a matter of I would say, I don't want to guess, but it was quite a significant, I'm going to say between 30 and 50% more is charged for a private. You can fact check me. I'm the one politician who will say, please fact check me. But it was quite a significant boost in the amount that we pay for a surgery that's done in the private sector. So yes, we pay for OHIP often. I mean, there are people that are going around. I see them all the time and said my wait list for a publicly funded one was longer. So I took out my credit card and I went to a different city far away to get it done. That needs to be tightened up, and we need to make sure we use a centralized system of specialist referrals so that doctors aren't sending faxes all over the place, like faxes, really? And we need to be sure that we are optimizing the operating room that taxpayers have already paid for. These hospitals, they're using lines of credit to pay the bill, pay for their payroll. We shouldn't have hospitals going into debt when we have operating rooms that aren't being utilized. And it's an HR drain to take people out of the hospital sector into the private sector to work in these clinics. And we saw how that worked out for long-term care and home care. I don't think it's going well. And so I really worry that the more we add on to the things that we privatize, there's no model out there. I think Alberta's doing it. It hasn't led to faster wait times, and it hasn't led to financial efficiency. So why are we starting something that's been proven to not work?
The centralized list of surgeons is something I've heard before, where people actually get, the surgeons that are available, they get assigned to people. It doesn't necessarily matter that they're immediately local, but the next surgeon available. And there's long periods of time in hospitals that the operating rooms just aren't even being used, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I do rely on different experts in that field to say if we opened up, I think the stat I heard was if we opened up our surgical rooms for an extra 2 hours a day, we would clear off the backlog in a short amount of time. So wow. I think there's a lot of flexibility. I think again, fact check me, but they're closing down at 5 o'clock. So some of them aren't operating at all across the province, and some of them are operating only like a kind of 9 to 5 workday. I know there's studies you don't want to be doing surgeries at midnight if people aren't as good at doing surgeries at midnight, but I think we got to find some flexibility so that we could optimize the infrastructure we have.
That's what I like to hear. We'll stick with the strictly provincial issues and important relationships. So Indigenous people's issues and Indigenous rights in terms of where does the Green Party think we are at and need to go?
So I think there's been a lot of messes made. We talk about environmental justice as important. We do find that like a lot of polluting industries sometimes are close to Indigenous communities. So we do believe that like Anjanang, Grassy Narrows, we need to do a better job of fixing the pollution that's negatively impacting people's health and well-being. And then any future industries and projects need free, prior, and informed consent so that Indigenous communities are truly treated as equal partners in these projects. We know that there's a lot of look to the north for the Ring of Fire and for the minerals that will help with electrification. But if we've not learned anything from the past, we'll continue to make messes. We'll continue to harm Indigenous communities and perpetuate the impact of colonization. I think what we've learned is Indigenous folks need to equally benefit from projects in their community. They want to be part of the workforce. They want to make sure it's done in a way that's environmentally sensitive, that protects their traditional way of life. And so we urge the government to have a fulsome process to ensure that that happens.
You touched on development there. So on the issue of environment and development, and I combine that because there's this perception that development always means improvement, but I don't always believe that. Certainly development means change. So, as a party that is a green party, the suggestion might be that you're anti-development. Is that true?
No, in fact, Mike Schreiner's housing bill was about lifting exclusionary zoning. So we have a problem where we relied too much on sprawl development. This means that maybe both adults in the house might need a car to get to work. This means that we need new infrastructure like sewers and roads and highways and water treatment centers. All these things cost a lot of money. So sprawl development actually costs 2.5 times more than building within a countryside line where infrastructure exists. So if you don't want your property taxes to go up, you should be looking for ways to build within a countryside line or an urban boundary. So when 70% of the province is zoned for single family dwelling, it creates a big barrier for middle developers. Yes, we can build those big high rises. Yes, we can build suburbs and make a profit, but we've almost made it impossible to build that missing middle. So Mike's bill was called Legalize It. Let's make sure that we can put fourplexes, 4 stories. I live in an older neighborhood with a low rise down the street, and it was just built as part of the neighborhood. 6 to 11 stories along the major corridors. I think if we open up just that, we would meet our housing targets, and it wouldn't come in 10 years or 14 years that it takes to build a subdivision, and it wouldn't lead to double-digit property tax increases because we're investing in the roads and infrastructure that we already have that we can improve. We see massive backlogs from the municipalities. They're facing extreme amounts of budgetary pressures because that construction price index, like the inflation for construction, has remained really high, and things like cement and stuff cost double or 30% more per year than it did before, and it's hard for them to keep up. So if we really want to be smart with how we use our resources, looking at the labor shortages, looking at the cost of supplies, we need to be smart about utilizing what we have and alleviating that pressure on the property tax owner. It protects our farms. It protects our wetlands. These are things that help us not flood. It gives us a place to enjoy where we live. People love Ontario because it's beautiful and they get to go for a walk. We also like to eat. We can't eat money. If we keep paving over our farmland, we're losing it at 319 acres a day. We look at, I think there's a 25-year span when we could be we would have lost a lot of our farmland, and it's our biggest employer, biggest sector in the province. It'd be foolish to jeopardize it, and that's what we see happening all across the province. I was part of that committee looking at these forced urban boundary expansions, and they've added 6,400 acres to my urban boundary, right? And that's greenbelt all over again. So we've learned nothing, and we've let this government continue to stick their hand in the cookie jar, oftentimes to benefit their wealthy insider friends.
Absolutely. And Clarington was famous over the Greenbelt issue for a certain individual that was mentioned in the final report. He's been interviewed on this podcast prior to that whole situation, but we don't have endless farmland. And out here, I've got a piece of land right next to Darlington Provincial Park that the mayor is determined to develop into something. And it's a last piece of waterfront along Lake Ontario and the GTA, and it's under apple orchard mostly right now. And I keep reminding him that it's we can't build more lakefront, and we can't do that. It's just not possible. And it's this through the whole Trump tariff thing. I saw some comments by people talking about maybe now we should think about how quickly we're consuming farmland, and think about what we're going to eat and what sort of security we have for our food supply. And this is something I've been saying for a long time, because it's not endless. And people have this idea that Saskatchewan, the wonderful farmland they have out there, it's just not as productive. They think it is. They think it's the quintessential farmland, but the best farmland is in Ontario, southwestern Ontario, and this part of Ontario around the GTA. And this is why it's so easy to build houses here, is because it's also a good place to grow food. And so we have to come to terms with that sort of thing, and balanced development. And I watch a YouTube series called Not Just Bikes, and that guy is really good talking about housing and urbanization. And strangely enough, there's an episode about bike lanes in Ontario. But he talks about the missing middle that for most of Ontario, and focuses on Montreal and how well they've got, and they've had this for a long time, probably because they live on an island, that they have those triplexes, and it's just part of the Montreal landscape. So I appreciate those things that you've just said. So moving on, what is the relationship between provincial Greens and the federal Greens? Are you kind of in step? Is it a good relationship?
So we are separate organizations, as you know. We have different leaders, different boards, etc. But locally, I'm really grateful that I work closely with Mike Morris. So Kitchener's kind of unique. We have a federal Green and a provincial Green. So there's a lot of ways in which there can be red tape on different levels of government. For example, in two-way all they go, the Minister of Transportation says, well, it's the CN rails that are not opened up enough to allow us to use them. Now they said they're going to get into a negotiation to open up more of those rail lines. But this is a lot of projects, especially when it comes to housing, when it comes to transportation, even healthcare. We see how we need to have some coordination. I just tried to get cancer drugs for a patient who was dying and had these recommended drugs. And if she had lived in a lot of other places, she might have had access. But we needed that coordination between the Canada Health and our Minister of Health in order to kind of push forward to allow some of these medical innovations to come online faster. I'm grateful that locally we have a Green MP, and so we do coordinate with our federal counterparts and try to see how we can share knowledge, see how we can echo each other, so that we can move together more in a more coordinated way.
You've had a small, albeit talented, presence in the legislature. How do you advance your mission with such a small presence?
I think there's a few things that make Greens unique, and I'm really proud of that. We're big collaborators. So when I first started in the legislature, my goal was to have coffee with every single MPP. Sometimes we talk to each other across the way. There's a lot of yelling that goes on. I think when it comes to climate, I just say, what's your plan? But sometimes that erodes relationships and trust. So I made that intention to kind of build trust across party lines. So I did pass a bill called Person's Day. It was spearheaded by Liberal Mary Margaret McMahon and co-signed by Kristen Wong-Tam from the NDP, supported by the PCs. So I think there are moments in time we can overlap and coordinate. So we lead on solutions. We challenge the government, like with their energy plans, to do what's fiscally responsible for taxpayers, and push back against the narratives sometimes that they have about solving climate change with carbon capture, which we know has failed across the world and has been a big money sink. So we challenge them on the kind of false narratives that are leading to misspending dollars. We work hard to collaborate and try to work together on key initiatives. And then, like food nutrition, like I was speaking up to promote more funding for school nutrition. One of the few, I walked across the minister's horse and I said, there's kids. We've had a quadrupling of demand for school snacks in my region. The local organizations can't keep up. Kids are hungry and they can't learn. And so I wrote letters to him. I met with him. He coordinated with the federal government as well. And here we see $108 million coming into our local not-for-profits to ensure that kids aren't hungry at schools in Ontario. So there's ways we can work together. But as you see with the Greenbelt scandal, it's also important that we hold this government accountable for being honest, for being having Ontarians in mind and using money honestly and efficiently. And we lead on solutions. You know, we champion the idea of taking trucks off the 401 onto the 407, you know, instead of building the 413. Everybody wants that now. It's an instantaneous thing we could do to alleviate gridlock. We've also spearheaded the doubling of OW and ODSP, knowing how many folks can't afford a roof and food, and it costs our healthcare system, it costs policing, it costs lives. And so that led to an increase in other parties coming on board. It led to a little bump and an indexing to inflation. We still have a gap there, but we're proud to be proud to initiate a lot of this action that led to some change.
Wow. All the work that goes on behind the curtain, not in front of the cameras in the legislature. That's what not politics, but governance has been for a long time and has eroded away from that so much. So it's great to hear how hard you guys are working that way. What do you wish most of all for Ontario on the eve of an election call that we know is happening and we've known for a while is happening? What's your wish?
I did want to mention one more thing, that the Greens don't whip our votes. And so I can actually speak up for my local community and not be kind of looking to a party leader as my boss. So that's
Gotcha.
kind of an interesting tweak. I think folks are frustrated that their local communities aren't represented well because it's really the power of the party leader. Sorry, no, I didn't mean it that way.
That's hitting hard. That's hitting hard to me locally.
I'll let me wind it back. That on occasion, I'll say, on occasion, the party politics trumps the local voice, if I may say.
Yeah,
so,
gotcha.
Yeah. So we see, sometimes that partisanship kind of eroding trust in voters. Sorry. Okay, so for this election, I want us to focus on a roof and food. Too many of our neighbors are struggling to just pay the bills, and we see that having a big negative impact on all our infrastructure. I'm so grateful when I go to a voter's home and they say, I'm good. I'm like, great, you have a roof and food, But too often I meet someone at the door and they say, you know what, I can't afford my rent. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be able to live here. Or I have a bad acting landlord. There's no accountability for them. They get away with stuff. They're harassing me. They're trying to up my rent more than they're allowed. They're trying to say they need to evict me to do renovations. So I'm worried that I'm going to be homeless. So I think that's number one, is a roof and food, right? So people can stay healthy. And beyond that, we need to properly fund the infrastructure we've grown to rely on. We have a great healthcare system, public healthcare system, public education system, supported colleges and universities and childcare. And we need to be sure that those have adequate funding to ensure that we're not making a mess and jeopardizing the next generation and jeopardizing the care and well-being of our population.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today and meeting me at Exit 425. How can people learn more about the Green Party of Ontario?
So I think it's always good to do your homework. I have lots of voters that say, hey, I'm not giving you my vote. I'm going to do some digging. So go to gpo.ca. You can check out our socials. I'm Aislinn Clancy, KC. And there's a lot of different, I'm an Instagrammer, so I probably have a lot on there about Facebook, X, and so on. So I hope you'll check us out. If you care about a livable planet for our next generation, I hope you'll get involved in the movement. We help each other out across the province to kind of bring more green leadership to the legislature. So no matter where you live, you can get involved. And I hope you'll take this election very seriously. And above all, vote.
Absolutely. I've been on that, beating that drum for a while in terms of support the people that you want in and work to get the people out that you don't want in. So, and it's something we need to do. And Amy Klobuchar at the inauguration ceremony for President Trump gave a great speech, including President Kennedy's famous quote that basically says, you know, you may not like politics, but you're holding office and you're responsible for what's going on here. So, and that's on all of us. So thank you so much for just believing in this mission and understanding what you're doing, and for taking it on our behalf. So, and thank you for sharing everything about the Greens that you can in 30 minutes. So
Thank you so much, Steve. I think you're an important voice that people rely on to get some straight facts, right? And hold people accountable. So I appreciate the role you play in bringing local media to your community, and also getting voices from all across the province with different perspectives for your community.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we can speak again. All right.
I'm ready. Give me a call. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to this episode of Exit 425. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. Our mission is to provide substantial information and education that goes where you want, because it's where we live. Exit 425 is a production of Studio 38 Audio, copyright 2024. My name is Steve Ray. If you have any questions or would like more information about Exit 425, join our Exit 425 Facebook group, like the Facebook page, check out Instagram, Medium, LinkedIn, X, and TikTok, or email me at exit425-401@gmail.com. Exit 425. It's where we live.